Goodness me. Well, delighted is the wrong word, but honoured perhaps to be joined by Emma Webber, the mother of the Nottingham Attack victim Barnaby Webber. Thank you so much for coming into the studio. And
hi guys.
It must be a pretty difficult day to be reliving it all and hearing, frankly, the repeated failures that led to what happened.
It's horrifying, isn't it? I mean, it's horrifying for people who are aware of the situation and have been following it for the past year or so. But yeah, being that family and hearing how many times that monster could have been stopped by so many different individuals, departments and actually organisations, because it's not just the NHS, there's Leicestershire Police Force and Nottinghamshire Police Force who failed as well. But yeah, it's devastating.
And do you get the impression that there has been any accountability taken? Do you believe that it is important for individuals who have been involved in some of these multiple failures to be named?
Absolutely. It's not a witch hunt, but when you read the report, if anybody's reading the report or even reading the headlines, you can see that there was gross negligence and catastrophic failures which directly led to this individual not being treated properly, not being sectioned properly even, and being released out into the community. If you're at that level, if you're a senior decision maker in the NHS, in medicine, I would say the same within police forces as well, and you don't do your job properly, then you have to be held to account. You have to be. And it's, like I said already, it's not a witch hunt, but without holding people to account, I don't think change will happen, because this is, as Wes said, it's happened again. It's happening again and again and again. And ever since Barney was murdered, it's happened. How many times in this country have there been... People can't put their children into holiday clubs without worrying. You can't put your child on a school bus without worrying. You can't walk through Leicester Square in broad daylight. You know, it's so much has to change. It's not just mental health, but I think accountability for agencies who are public servants who are there and employed and paid well to keep us safe and to keep us well. If they don't do their job, then yes, of course, training and all of that. But if you're at the top level, you need to go.
There were so many agencies involved with this, and Valdo Calocane bounced between them, and it's almost as if they weren't following up on their own work. It's almost as if because there were so many different agencies, it was always someone else's problem.
Yeah.
It was always sort of thrown off to the end of the road. I mean, how is that fixed? I mean, accountability, I suppose, is one avenue.
I think it's an insult, the way that we've been dealt with by quite a few of those agencies and the decision makers within there. I would say there's some very narrow shoulders and some very long pointy fingers, because that's what happens. The only route to getting these answers is a proper inquiry, because it's not just about this moment in time, this tragedy. It's about uncovering the source of the problems and actually fixing them properly. Many people aren't aware that the CQC report that came out today, this Section 48 urgent review, that's the first time the CQC have ever been instructed to do a Section 48 on an individual patient and his care. It's in the past, that level of senior, serious reporting and investigating is done into a hospital, a care home, a trust, an organisation. So I think that just shows, and what that's uncovered illustrates.
So this process is a shock to the system, then?
Yeah.
I'm not used to this level of potential accountability.
Yeah, and I think when the independent NHS England findings come out in the next month or two, there'll be even more, because that goes a bit broader than the CQC. And as you said, it's about that. It's about that. Where's the cohesion? Where's the sort of joined up thinking, just doing your job properly? In a hospital, especially in a mental health trust, there should be a police liaison officer that is the conduit between the two. So dangerous people that have committed offences and are at risk to the public, the police are aware of them. Calocane had an outstanding warrant and he was released. Yeah, I mean, who got that so wrong? Who was not doing their job properly? I understand resources, I understand limitations, I understand pressure. However, to the people that would say that to me, I would say, imagine losing your child in the most brutal, horrific way you would ever imagine. It's stuff of nightmares. And then come back and say you think you're under pressure.
I mean, reading that a doctor had warned that this man could be a killer. I mean, how does that make you and the other families involved in this field, just to know that there was this warning that this man could do something like this?
Years before. It's sickening, right? It's sickening, and it's... I mean, my instinct would be to question and say, well, what did you do if you think someone's going to be... What did you do? But because we weren't given the opportunity to partake in the Panorama documentary in any way, shape or form, we weren't able to put anything on camera, off camera, behind the scenes across to the team. And I think there's some very big omissions in there. There's some inaccuracies, and we're hugely disappointed with the Panorama team, and they know that.
Now this is the Panorama programme that aired last night.
Last night, yeah.
And they spoke with the family, the Calocane family. They sat down with them, painted quite a sympathetic picture of the Calocane family and spoke about their problems and the mental health side of things. It must have been... Well, did you watch it? Were you able to see any of it? Or was it too hard?
It's too brutal. It's difficult maybe for most people to understand, but speaking quite frankly, as I've always done, to see the family that brought that individual into this world and into our country is very traumatic, to hear those voices. And as we feared, we were told on the 26th of July from Nav, who is one of the BBC reporters involved in it, he was sort of on the programme a lot last night, that this was done, it was in the can, it was with their lawyers, and that some of the big questions, Emma, that you've asked are going to be answered. People that have never spoken before are going to speak on camera, including the Calocane family. In that moment, I can remember, I was actually in the middle of Taunton Town Centre, speaking to him outside the bank, and that's when you get that feeling that, so the natural question is, OK, well, can I ask why we've not been at least made aware of this prior, or been asked to contribute, or at least have our thoughts considered? And I was told that we were involved in the long-form news piece that was done in January. That was very much our side of the opinion, and this is their side of the opinion. And, I do think that the Calocane family will have questions more than last night to answer in due course. I don't want to personally attack them. I don't even want to think about that family. However, it is an insult that it comes across as they did they really do everything they could?
Do you think it was right that they were given that platform?
I don't think it's not. My background is media and communications and everything. So I'm all for investigative journalism, broadcasting. There is a duty to the public. There's a duty to report. Panorama I don't believe, had a duty of care to us as families. I think it would have been a fairer programme and a better programme had they spoken to us and fact-checked some stuff with us. They said that we asked for an unduly lenient sentence. We didn't. That was the Attorney General. That's significant because...
Said that you'd asked?
Yeah, last night in the programme they reported that the families had pushed for this unduly lenient sentence, which was a really awful trauma in the spring of this year. That wasn't us. That was the Attorney General that called for that.
That meant it had to be almost relitigated, looked at how it was gone through, and they decided the original sentence...
Because they had to go with what they were presented with and what we've been uncovering. There's two words, treatment resistant, which came up in the programme last night, and you'll hear a lot. The chief doctor, expert for the prosecution, said in court at length for about 15 minutes that Calocane is treatment resistant, and therefore, being so treatment resistant, he's so dangerous he can't be in a prison because he must be in a mental health institution, a secure institution, because the level of medication that he will need can't be given in a prison, and it's much, much more than that, and I don't want to go into detail. So that's actually not true. He wasn't... That makes it sound as though he was resistant and the treatment didn't work. No, he
wasn't taking.
No, he was resisting treatment. So he was resisting taking the tablets. So he had his medication. Occasionally he'd taken it. Most of the time he didn't, but he took it and he stockpiled it. He lied. He pulled the wool over many of the mental health professionals' eyes to say that. And so for me, it's such an insult that we had to sit through that awful sentencing and hear that, and it's not true.
Yeah, I remember when well, the whole of the country was watching and listening to the sentencing then, and to hear manslaughter, excruciating. I can't imagine how you would have felt at the time. But looking forward with this public inquiry, what are you hoping to come out of that? OK,
so we've been assured of the public inquiry, but what's really, really important is that it has to be a statutory judge-led inquiry, because that's the only way that the people involved in all of this, right the way to, will have to give evidence and will have to give the truth. So that has to happen.
Otherwise, could they dodge it?
Yeah, I mean, for example, IOPC do investigations. Police officers that are interviewed for that can give a no-comment answer. How's that helpful to uncovering things? We're not on a witch hunt, as I keep saying, but what we have to do is get answers. And the big questions, like, so talk about drugs. We talked about the medication for schizophrenia. What about drugs? No one has ever tested him for drugs that we can see. So if you're sectioned 4 times, you're in psychosis, why?
Never.
No, that we've been able to find. The police didn't bother doing it. They did full toxicology on my son, but they didn't take any toxicology on Calocane. They took it on Grace. They took it on Ian. This is a whole different thing.
That's appalling. But
that's why we have to have the public inquiry, because we have to get these answers. Because if it's the last thing I do on this earth, and I would say the same for Grace and Ian's family, we will make sure this happens.
Reading around this case, seeing the multiple flats that Valdo Calocane had broken into in the years prior.
Oh, yeah.
The woman who jumped from a 4th, 3rd story window to flee for her life, all before he was still able to roam the streets, not locked up, not put in a secure hospital, prison, behind bars, just away.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware until today.
Most people aren't. It's eye-watering.
Of the scale
horror.
Of his history of offending.
He's the most dangerous. It was always going to happen. That's why I questioned some of the things that were said by his family last night. The girl that jumped out to save her life, she'd suffered spinal injuries. She was probably too scared. I don't know, making assumptions, but he wasn't prosecuted for that. The CPS should have prosecuted him. That's in the public interest. We sat in a meeting with the CPS and asked about all the various offences, all the times he'd been arrested before, why he hadn't been charged. And we were told by Sam Shallows of the CPS in East Midlands, because it wasn't in the public interest. Well, yeah, it was actually.
Goodness me. Well, thank you so much for coming into the studio today. It must be an extremely difficult day, and just you're an inspiration in terms of being such an advocate for your child. Thank you very much indeed. We really appreciate your time.